Yeah, and hi, Katie, with another video. Hope everyone's doing well. And again, if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build the channel. Okay, and this is actually my third attempt to make this video, and I had some technical problems with my laptop. Okay, first, before I begin, probably everyone knows right now, Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision in the U.S. has been overturned. It was expected. It was in the pipeline for quite a while. I feel bad about it. The Democrats, I've gone to quite a few pro-choice demos back in the day. Went to a really big one in DC years ago. And this was not unexpected. The Democrats bear a lot of blame for this. They were Biden, actually, Joe Biden was actually responsible for getting Clarence Thomas nominated for one. Many times the Democrats could have developed a federal law to guarantee women's reproductive rights to cut across this. They enjoyed having the Supreme Court as a football, like terrify people. You got to vote for us. The Supreme Court's in the balance. One small silver lining or big silver lining out of this is that it's calling into question the Supreme Court itself. The part of the bourgeois state is calling into question its legitimacy with a lot of people, which is a good thing. I mean, a group of 9 unelected, appointed, lifetime appointed people who are very blatantly political appointees, have a huge influence on people's lives. It's completely undemocratic. I mean, a few years ago, it was going the other way around. People were really, even the left was really the Kavanaugh nomination. People were sowing illusions in the Democratic Party. Now it's going the other way around. The legitimacy of it is being questioned by lots of people, which is a very good thing. Anyway, okay, maybe in a future video I'll discuss this more. This is on Jimmy Dore. Okay, I made about a year ago, I made a couple of videos on Jimmy Dore, comedian, reasons why I want to revisit this topic. Okay, well, a couple of reasons. He's, of course, a very popular political comedian. He has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He would be a lot more, many more subscribers, but the algorithms are being suppressed. Anyway, he's kind of in the political community, in the tradition of sort of Lenny Bruce, Mort Sahl, Bill Hicks, Richard Pryor, especially George Carlin. Dore has studied George Carlin pretty closely. He has his own style, of course. He's more political. He has topical videos coming a couple times a day, and he comments on issues. He's pulling people out of the Democratic Party from the left. He's relentlessly exposing hypocrisy and the reactionary nature of the Democratic Party, which is a very good thing. Leftist socialists have been saying this for years. That's what we need to do. And he's actually doing it and reaching far more people than any small socialist organization is. Okay. Some takes. So the reason why I want to revisit this topic, a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, I've been known to be a big Jimmy Dore fan. And yeah, recently Dore made two videos actually. One was like a different version. There were different versions of the same thing, echoing Bill Maher. And I'm not a Bill Maher fan. Bill Maher had a really awful transphobic video, transphobic take, and Dore kind of echoed that. And I'll get to this later. And I wish Jimmy Dore did not do this. It was pretty cringy. And I'll get this later. And I'm disappointed in him. I'm still a Jimmy Dore fan, though. And my friend said, Jimmy Dore's useless, really vicious transphobe. And my friend thought he was useless to the left. Dore doesn't have a working class orientation. Dore does, brings people out of the Democratic Party, but doesn't do anything with them. They just fall into another type of liberalism. I disagree with this take. I'll analyze this in a minute. Another friend of mine said, Dore he wouldn't know a worker if he stumbled over him. I disagree with this. I think Jimmy Dore does have a working class orientation. If you watch him for any length of time, he's had Chris Smalls, the Amazon organizer, and probably, 6 or 7 times, quite a few times, and Dore very enthusiastically followed the Amazon organizing drive. Dore also followed the Walmart organizing drive. He has several videos on that. He followed the Starbucks organizing drive. He also interviewed an IWW organizer who worked in organizing Krispy Kreme, the coffee shop franchise in the Seattle area. And he enthusiastically followed that. Dore also interviewed Jane McAuliffe, leftist labor organizer, theorist on. And, Dore says, Dore often does say we need a party, we need a movement for working people, for the working class. He says this pretty often, and he advocates a general strike. He says this pretty often. If you watch him any length of time, Dore often, does say he doesn't really know the way forward, and I don't either. He doesn't really know, but working people can shut the system down. The only thing they'll get is health care for all is a general strike, which is absolutely true. I 100% agree with this. Dore also collaborates with a group called the YouTube network, a Revolutionary Blackout, it used to be Fred Hampton Leftist, like a YouTube media network of young Black African-American leftist activists. And once a month, they hold a general strike summit, and Dore is a big part of this. They're guests from leftist guests, and kind of brainstorm how we can organize a general strike. Literally, the last one I haven't watched it yet, but it was on. Theme was building working class solidarity, and Jimmy Dore was one of the main speakers. I didn't watch it, but okay, so I'd say he very much does have a working class orientation. People also say, he has an expensive house. His apparently one thing, a $1.9 million house in Pasadena, or $1.9 million worth of improvements in his house. Okay, a couple of things about that. First, people use that against him when he got really controversial, especially when he bashed the Democratic Party. People brought that up. Oh, he's like a champagne socialist or whatever. My take, well, first of all, my hair's getting my fish here. My take on that. My take on that is first, that's the price of real estate there. I mean, real estate. I live outside Portland, Maine, and houses are roughly between $300,000 and $4,000, almost $500,000. I used to work in Somerville, Massachusetts, in a working class area. Houses are more like over that, $500,000, $600,000. That's the price of real estate these days. That's the price of real estate these days. And Dore, I don't begrudge this either. I mean, he's paid his dues. He's spent a large part of his life struggling. He's in his early 60s. He spent a lot of time struggling. I don't begrudge him that. If you follow his career, he's a successful YouTuber, even though the mainstream is trying to suppress him. So I don't begrudge him that. I mean, he's doing something, I think, very, very positive for the left. Okay, a little bit about him, who he is. So a little bit about him, yeah. He's from the Chicago area. He's Polish, Irish background. I originally thought he was part Italian, but he's Polish, Irish background. He went to a very strict Catholic school, and he was sexually abused. And he's talked about this, not at length, but he has talked about this. And he's anti-Catholic, but he hasn't, talked about this a lot. But he's not fond of the Catholic Church, and I kind of agree with him. Okay, he comes from a family of cops. His dad was a cop, and relatives were cops, and he's very anti-police. And he often said this during the BLM protest 2 summers ago. He knows how corrupt and brutal and ignorant the police are, and he knows their role in capitalist society. He's talked about this. He says, I come from a family of cops. I know what they're like. And I don't know if this creates problems for himself and his own extended family, but he does. He talks about the police. He hates them, and he knows what they're like from firsthand knowledge. And he broke out of that mentality. And okay, he worked for about 10 years as a bricklayer, and he was a forklift operator, and he had industrial jobs while he was working to break into comedy, build a comedy career. He worked at comedy clubs in the Chicago area for quite a while. He had really severe health issues. I don't know the whole story. He's talked about this during the fight for healthcare. He had back issues, and doctors said, you're going to have to get this operated on sooner rather than later. Or it's going to be a really endanger your health a few years from now. You're going to have to deal with this. And he was often in extreme pain. He actually said when he was doing a comedy gig, he would be really in pain doing it, and he would collapse afterwards. He was suicidal over it. He said his wife, Steph Zamorano, talked him out of suicide. He got a job with TYT, the Young Turks, like in 2009. And he got a spot on Comedy Central. Dore said this just in the nick of time. It literally saved his life. He had health insurance for the first time in the barbaric U.S. healthcare system. The lucky people have health insurance. He had no health insurance, and he finally could get his condition taken care of, his back operated on, whatever. And this like literally saved his life. So he has firsthand knowledge of the barbarism of of the U.S. healthcare system. He's not like an abstract academic or whatever. The TYT, the Young Turks, by the way, is I haven't watched that much. There's Cenk Uygur is a main figure, and he does it with Anna Kasparian. They're going to come in later in the story. They were, I think, roots in a radio show early 2000s, basically during the Bush administration. The Iraq War was going really badly, and back then the security state was coalescing around the Republican Party and the right wing. Now it's actually the opposite way around. The military-industrial complex and security state is coalescing around the Democratic Party and the quote left, or what the media calls the left, largely, I think, influenced Silicon Valley and the professional managerial class. And Dore, by the way, knows this very well, and he often talks about it, not quite in those words, but he often talks about it. So anyway, the Young Turk, guy Cenk Uygur started the Young Turks. There was a movement by liberals to like, we got to get our message out. The right wing, the shock jocks, like the Rush Limbaugh and so on, were dominating the airwaves in the 80s and 90s. So some liberals said, well, we got to get our message out. And there was some, alliance between liberals and the more radical left. We were kind of on the same side. And now we're, I think, on opposite sides, but we were on the same side. There was the Young Turks, there was Air America, Al Franken, a bunch of other outlets like a counterattack against the Bush administration. Many of these groups moved, these liberal groups moved to the right later on. So anyway, Dore was with the TYT came out of this. So Jimmy Dore was with TYT from 2009 to 2019. I'm not really too familiar with his work. He had a spot in Comedy Central for a while, and can't say I'm really super familiar with his work during this period, but he left TYT in 2019 over Russiagate. They believed he moved to the left. He's constantly moving more and more to the left. He disagreed with Russiagate and thought it was nonsense. Cenk Uygur was really big on Russiagate. And I remember there was a panel discussion on TYT over the U.S. role in Syria. Cenk and someone else, and Kyle Klinsky or someone, thought it was good. The U.S. could play a good role in Syria. Jimmy Dore said, no, absolutely not. He took a strong anti-imperialist stand, which I think is very good. So he left TYT in 2019. He left on good terms. I started following him maybe 6 months or so before he left, and he left on good terms. Dore was originally on the left wing of the Democratic Party. He was a big Sanders supporter in 2016. And less of a supporter, but he still was a supported Sanders in 2020, and also Tulsi Gabbard. He had illusions in both these people. But in the space of about 2 years, he moved to the far left. And I could watch it happening. It was really interesting week by week. He moved to the far left. He became rapidly very disgusted by Sanders. Sanders was incredibly weak. He had a populist campaign against billionaires, the billionaire class, and for healthcare for all. Yeah, sure. But he was Sanders was incredibly weak. He had his campaign within the framework of what was acceptable to the Democratic Party. Talking about my good friend Joe Biden. Bernie actually Russiagated himself one instant, which Dore constantly points out. There was Washington Post or whatever had these articles that there's some buzz that the Russians had infiltrated the Sanders campaign, which is bullshit. And Sanders knew it was bullshit, but felt he had to go along with it. Sanders had this speech, told Mr. Pullman to stay out of my campaign. And it's such a pathetic performance, and Dore called this out. And at the end, towards the end of the campaign, Dore was calling Sanders a miserable sheepdog, and he was absolutely right. He had allusions to Tulsi Gabbard a little longer. Tulsi was kind of an anti-interventionist, not really a leftist, but anti-interventionist to some extent. And she was on his show a fair number of times. Well, the 2020 campaign was very tumultuous. There were the COVID lockdowns, and then Obama intervened, made a couple of phone calls, got some of the candidates to drop out. Joe Biden entered, and he was considered an absurd figure, he acted weird, bizarre in his campaign. He was an absurd figure. People thought he'd drop out after a couple of the primaries. But Obama kind of manipulated things, got people, whatever, and finally got Biden to be the front runner. Really, really complicated. The Democrats have a severe, like George McGovern syndrome. They're afraid of going too far left. They're terrified of that, and we got to win the election. and mediocrity like Joe Biden came in, and Tulsi, anyway, Tulsi, at the end, she dropped out. She endorsed Joe Biden, and the upshot is Jimmy Dore was disgusted by this. He was disgusted. He finally like left the Democratic Party entirely. Said they're absolutely horrible. He moved to the far left politically. You could see this happening. He was on the gray zone, leftist media outlet. There was when Ben Norton was in with the gray zone. He later on left, but it was just I was watching. It was really interesting. There was a live chat, and somebody said a couple of times in the live chat, "Hey Ben, unleash the hounds of hell. Have Jimmy read some Lenin." And Ben Norton finally said, "Yeah, okay, I'll." He mentioned this. Said he had asked Jimmy Dore to read "State and Revolution" by Lenin, which is a classic work by Lenin. And Dore kind of joking. Reading's hard, but there was a screenshot later of Jimmy Dore holding the famous Robert Tucker Lenin anthology. I have it in my bookcase somewhere here, but I hold it. It's kind of funny. I have no idea if Jimmy Dore read Lenin. People joke that Dore might emerge as the foremost American exponent of Leninism. It didn't quite happen, but it influenced. You could tell it definitely influenced his thinking. Dore is not a big theory guy. We don't expect him to be, though he does have his body of theory. I did mention that Dore was the modern version of Eugene Debs. I take that back. It was over the top, but just showing I want to show the pathetic nature of the U.S. left, that somebody like Dore is a comedian. He's the best of what we have. He has far more reach than he's so small, tiny socialist organization. Okay, a lot of people on the left don't like Dore. He got controversial even before the controversies. And I'm honestly was a little puzzled by this, and honestly really puzzled. Why would a leftist not like Jimmy Dore? I think it's his personality. Largely, he gets angry, he rants, and I'm okay with it. I mean, he's a righteous angry. He's not shock jock. He's very well informed. His face turns red sometimes. It's almost funny to watch. I know he would collaborate a lot with Aaron Mate, and they have a Russiagate nonsense, and Dore was going this rant. His face was turning red. Aaron Mate was kind of like a slight chuckle. He was kind of so bemused by it. My dad had that kind of personality. My dad would go on political rants, friendly, go and get himself worked up, and Dore's the same way. I'm totally okay with that personality. Some people are turned off by it. I get that. Some people feel uncomfortable. I'm totally okay. That's who he needs: passionate working class anger. And Dore's politics, I largely agree with. He has the right take on so many things. He's breaking through the corporate mainstream media consensus, which they work very hard. We're constantly bombarded by this propaganda. Okay. So there's that. So Dore had illusions in the Democratic Party. He broke out of it. Now, first got controversy in the fight for the forced vote movement, which started, I believe, in late 2020. Democrats got in, they control the House. It was first proposed by some congressman. I forget who it was. He dropped out, didn't play a role. But the main figures were Justin Jackson, an NFL football player whose mom, as far as I understand, his mom had died when he was young. His mom had died of a preventable disease because the family couldn't afford health care. And Jimmy Dore, of course, has had his own experience. So they kind of collaborated together. And the idea of the forced vote movement was to get AOC to threaten to not vote to confirm Nancy Pelosi unless she called for a floor vote for Medicare for all. And of course, Pelosi would not do this. She's, donors wouldn't like that. She's corrupt hack. She would never do this. This would kind of expose what a fraud Pelosi was. So AOC herself didn't want to do this and expose what a fraud AOC is. And there was a big ruckus, big shitstorm. There's a division among the online left. I was watching this, and yeah, it's drama. It's popcorn eating drama, sure, but it does show development of a more radical left. And then, people like TYTs. Originally, Dore left on good terms, but there was a beginning of some tension between them. TYT really opposed Dore. Kyle Kalinske, Sam Cedar, the Majority Report, whole string of YouTubers came out against Dore, but Dore had a lot of defenders as well. And I was watching this. It was really interesting. When I watching this develop, definitely a political cleavage, and Dore played a very useful role. Anyway, AOC did not respond directly. By the way, Dore originally supported AOC. He was, in fact, Dore was the first show that AOC was on when she was running. Later on, she had nothing to do with him. She didn't return phone calls and so on. And Dore invited her on very politely many times. She refused to have anything to do with it, have anything to do with him. So anyway, AOC refused to respond directly to Dore, but did respond to Justin Jackson, did respond, and refused, well, it's not good way to do it. We got to be more careful. And the idea that, not voting for Pelosi would get this McCarthy, a right-wing Republican, in. The numbers don't add up from what I've seen. And even if it did, so what? The Democrats, the quote, left, they'll think of any reason not to fight. The right wing doesn't have that problem, but the left, so-called left, think of any reason, well, we can't really do it right now. And a ton of people start slamming Dore. In fact, there was buzz going around that he's a racist, he's misogynist, he was attacking AOC, man, he's really racist, misogynist. This guy, Mark Provost, who's on my Facebook friends list, he's a journalist of some sort. He came out of Occupy New Hampshire. I don't personally know him. I have friends who do personally know him. He was kind of on the left. He had articles in Consortium News and elsewhere. I don't know what happened to him. He seems like an odd character, but he's increasingly become like a shit lib. And he said Jimmy Dore was the voice of white rage. Like trying to make Dore look like a Klansman, which is nonsense. First, Dore's wife is Mexican, Stephanie Zamorano. The vast majority of his guests are African American. He closely collaborates with the Red Hampton leftists, or the Revolutionary Blackout. He very closely collaborates with African American YouTubers, and his race is nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's nonsense. A small grain of truth. I mean, since it's been said that veteran African-American activists don't feel comfortable in Dore-like spaces, there's some truth to this. Not any fault of Dore, but Dore's an angry white guy, and anger is justifiable. He's not angry in a right-wing direction. But, some older Black activists might feel a little uncomfortable. Like, example, he said Danny Haifong on from Black Agenda Report, young guy, and he actually established his career. Essentially, Danny Haifong was with Black Agenda Report for years. I believe he's Vietnamese American. He had a YouTube channel, has a YouTube channel, but Dore, basically, he was on Jimmy Dore probably 8 or 9 times, mainly explaining why he thought China was socialist. And whether it is or not, it's a different question, but I'm glad people get an alternate view of it. And Dore's also had people on China's not socialist. Dore says, I don't really know myself, but it's a debate. So, Dore essentially gave Danny Haifong a platform. He gave him an audience, and Danny Haifong's YouTube subscription shot up. He gave him an audience. Anyway, but I was saying the older, like Margaret Kimberly or the late Glenn Ford or maybe Bruce Dixon, as far as I know, they've never been on Jimmy Dore, and they might feel a little uncomfortable. I get that. It's not any fault of Dore. They have different audiences, and I kind of get that. But he does work very closely with younger African-American actors, very, very closely. So anyway, that's a point there. Interesting point was brought up. Okay, so there was forced to vote movement, and this created polarization and popcorn eating was interesting. Next thing that came after forced to vote movement was a fight, incredibly huge fight with TYT originally over Aaron Mate. Okay, TYT, the Young Turks, they had a subscribers only content where Chent does it with Anna Kasparian, who's kind of a liberal left rad-lib journalist of some sort. She apparently has a podcast with Jacobin Magazine. The Dirtbag Left, she was a part of this. And she's a DSA type. She writes for The Intercept at times. And, kind of, okay. So she subscribers only clip, which they didn't think anybody else could see, but their supporters, TYT supporters, she smeared Aaron Mate. Aaron Mate is on the Gray Zone, an investigative journalist. He's Canadian. He's the son of Gabor Mate, who a therapist has worked with addiction and trauma. Really interesting guy. Check out his work. So anyway, Aaron Mate has critiqued the Russiagate narrative, tore to pieces, really. The OPCW idea that Assad was gassing his own people, which was nonsense. And Aaron Maté emphasizes he doesn't like Assad, he doesn't support Assad, and people like Vanessa Beeley or Eva Bartlett who are upset at him for saying this, but he does say, the U.S. propaganda, the white helmets, and it was basically U.S. or British intelligence propaganda, and what was some of the stuff going on. So a certain type of liberal and leftist really hated him after that. So on TYT, Anna Kasparian really slammed Aaron Maté, smeared him. Oh, Aaron Maté, everyone cares about what Aaron Maté thinks. Oh, he's probably the Russian bot. I'm sure Putin's paying him. And it was a smear substance free. No allegations, didn't back it up by anything. And Cenk was there nodded as, oh yeah, that's what you get. That's what you get. So that clip kind of made the rounds on alternate media. Dore played this and really slammed TYT. Okay, and defended Aaron Maté. They are friends. Aaron Maté has been on Dore's show a lot of times. Okay, so this triggered this huge fight. Apparently, Anna Kasparian, so there was an incident maybe 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, when Jimmy Dore was on TYT. Apparently, this incident where Anna Kasparian wore a really short, skimpy skirt to work. And apparently she was with a group of college interns or something, giving them a tour. And Dore said, something jokingly, hey, nice new skirt. And this got a chuckle out of everyone there. Later on, Dore said, later on the day, he felt really bad about it and apologized to Anna Kasparian. And Anna said, don't worry about it. We're friends. Don't worry about it. And that's Jimmy Dore's version of the story. Again, it was forgotten. So when this thing about Aaron Maté came out, Dore actually, Anna Kasparian sent a text after having no contact with Dore for like 8 years or so, sent a text to Jimmy Dore threatening to use this, like threatening to Me Too him. Hey, remember that incident? Or basically telling him to back the fuck off or we're going to destroy you, make him look like a misogynist jerk. Okay, so Dore mentioned this on the show. He was totally open about it. And mentioned the whole incident, nice new skirt incident, and it usually did make Dore look kind of bad. And, people piled on, see, Dore is a misogynist jerk. Okay, so Dore then said, we got pushed back. Dore said, I've talked, another show later, I've talked with my lawyers and friends, and they strongly advised me to get in front of this issue. And he did. He mentioned the whole thing. So TYT, which anyone about, they had a clip, most of it, they had a section on their show for quite a while, for years. It's been scrubbed. They tried to scrub it from the internet, where they were basically borderline pornography. I'm not making this up. They had this episode where they make fun of mock women. Kim Kardashian, I think it was wearing really tight tights and gets here called camel toe. And Cenk was relentlessly mocking women who, and it was backing up. It was borderline pornography. It was really sleazy. So anyway, most of this has been scrubbed from the internet, but enough clips were found floating around. Dore is really good, or whoever's working for him is really good at putting these clips together. So episode Jimmy Dore found about 15 or 20 of these clips, extremely sleazy and misogynist, where Cenk and Anna were really relentlessly mocking women. And this episode is an incident, like 15 of them, I think, incident after incident after incident after incident, where mocking women, making fun of women, really sleazy, misogynist jokes. And this made the Young Turks look really bad. And everyone, and the big fight went on. People, it started to be a pile-on, a YouTube pile-on. Caitlin Johnstone supported Jimmy Dore, Caleb Maupin, the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal on one hand, somebody left, a socialist, supported Dore while people attacked him. And this was huge. It is kind of like a popcorn moment. See the Michael Jackson meme of eating popcorn. This was it was kind of fun to watch, but it did have some political significance. Anyway, huge pile-on. It was kind of interesting to watch. It made TYT look really bad. not just culturally, but politically as well. You know, people comments on their thing that they disagree with TYT's stand on U.S. imperialism. The U.S. played a bad role in Syria and so many other things. This was a shift in part of public opinion. TYT also was ratioed, like their subscribers would downvote everything. Like YouTube took their, you know, if you watch YouTube, you see likes, but the unlikes, you can't see that anymore. I think it became embarrassing to these content creators they were promoting, like TYT and some others. You know, people weren't watching this shit. People didn't like this shit. CNN or the mainstream, people were moving away from this. This created a radicalization. So also the viewership, like TYT has like several millions of subscribers, but their viewership has plummeted. Like many people watch them is watch my videos and I have 137 subscribers. People just weren't watching them anymore. And it created a crisis for TYT. They're not going to go away. They got a what Jimmy Dore calls Katzenberg cash, a guy named Jeffrey Katzenberg. He's a big LA Democratic Party donor and operative. Apparently he came out against homeless people. And LA has a huge and growing homeless, it's like something of Soil and Green, huge homeless population. And, you know, Jeffrey Katzenberg and large faction of the Democratic Party wanted to crack down on these people. It's bad for business. They wanted to crack down, they're on drugs, they crack down and crack down. So he donates like $6 million to TYT. So shortly later, Anna Kasparian was echoing this anti-homeless pitch, supposedly from the left, saying, I'm a leftist, I'm a liberal, but, you know, let's face it, these homeless people, they're on drugs, they're all blah, blah. It was clearly reflecting Jeffrey Katzenberg cash, and Dore pointed this out, and it really wrecked TYT. They're not going to go away. I mean, they get a lot of donors. They're not going to go away, but nobody's watching them, really. Okay, so also Dore pointed out a couple of things. TYT's in connection with U.S. imperialism. Anna Kasparian, by the way, she's Armenian background. She was born in LA, I think, but she spoke Armenian as her first language, comes from an Armenian family. The Young Turks historically were a group, early 1900s in Turkey. They were at least responsible for a reformist group, supposedly. They were responsible for the Armenian genocide. It's an irony right there. She's with a group, with a network calls itself the Young Turks, who killed her people like 100 years ago. Massacred her people. Waterville, Massachusetts is really Armenian history museum, really fascinating. You get a chance to see it. Okay, so Anna Kasparian was invited to like a NATO junket, some arms defense industry junket, really a NATO conference in Norway. And Dore said he went to one of those himself. He was invited. He went on a free trip to Norway. Dore said he refused to play ball. He didn't, you know, push NATO. He didn't play his win, you know, free trip, but he didn't play ball. But Anna Kasparian played ball big time. She had an interview with Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State for Bill Clinton. And I don't know, Madeleine Albright was famously saying that killing 500,000 Iraqi children was worth it. And she was allegedly responsible for the sanctions, which did this. You know, she had an interview with, I think, Barbara Walters. I know she, do you think this is worth it? Yeah, I think this is worth it. So Anna Kasparian interviewed her. It was a fawning interview. Oh, Madam Secretary, such a privilege to meet you. She didn't, it was a completely, very much of a fawning softball interview. Didn't bring that up at all about 500,000 Iraqi children. And Anna Kasparian is supposedly a leftist. She, you know, total fawning softball interview. And then Dore pointed this out and mercilessly slammed her for that. And you know, good. This is Dore is doing the Lord's work. He's doing important stuff. Okay. Okay, so there's that big incident. Then there was the healthcare for all fight. Then there was the TYT, Aaron Mate, Anna Kasparian fight. That was huge. Then I think about 6 or so months after that was the Boogaloo Boy incident. That's complicated. Okay, basically, Dore saw in his theory, he does have a political theory, that we're bombarded by this cultural war narrative, which is based on political theater and gestures. I mean, Democrats are relentlessly pushing identity politics, while the Republicans are whipping up this hysteria about other things. And like an classic incident, about a month ago now in Idaho, apparently some right-wing fascist group was busted. They wanted to disrupt a pride parade in Idaho. Well, they had Dore and many other people pointed this out. They had feds written all over them. It was a strategy of tension. There were feds. All these right-wing fascist groups are they're around. They're very heavily infiltrated by the FBI. They are the FBI in a way. There was the plot to kidnap Gresham Whitmer in Michigan. There was an FBI entrapment program. And my thoughts on the Capitol, right? The NPO calls it the insurrection. My thoughts on this, which I've shared on earlier videos. So they're whipping up this, give people the impression we're on the verge of a second civil war, which I think is nonsense. But the media is whipping up this divisiveness, what the media calls the left and the right. What Dore wanted to do is cut through this to working class issues, so like healthcare for all. Like, he pointed out Chris Smalls, Amazon activist. He organized Amazon Staten Island, and most of the people in Staten Island went for Trump, although admittedly, possibly, well, the employees were commuters, I don't really know, but Chris Smalls, Staten Island was Trump country. And so Dore said, we're going to refuse to work for somebody if they voted for Trump or if they voted for Biden. I mean, let's get beyond the sterile political theater, culture war, duopoly, and focus on working class issues. And I agree with him. You could say maybe he's a little workerist. Yeah, okay, but I largely agree with him. So what he did is he interviewed, and also the late Trump administration was really polarized time. There were like street battles in the Midwest, people are being shot. It looked like the feds or the power that be were trying to push this. Like Kyle Rittenhouse case, he was a scumbag, right-wing vigilante. He and people like him were pushed into confrontation with hardcore BLM and Antifa people on both sides. So like they wanted this shit to happen. And Dore pointed this out. So Dore's trying to cut through this and focus on actually working class issues which affect people's lives. I'm not saying, the other things, arts, identity politics is important. And I'm not saying the fight against fascism is important. I'm not totally denying that at all. But Dore was kind of trying to get cut through a lot of this shit. Okay, the way he handled it might have been a little clumsy. There's a group called the Boogaloo Boys, which appear to be somewhat amorphous militant libertarian group. And Dore had on a couple of times a guy named Magnus Pinvidia. I don't know his real name. Apparently he says his parents were hippies. Magnus means great, Pinvidia, all life. I don't know. But anyway, so Magnus Pinvidia was a Boogaloo boy who supported healthcare for all, worked with BLM, was anti-racist. He appeared to be a gay man as well. So I don't know. So Dore's trying to find common ground. He might have been, there was a lot of pushback. I don't know much about the Boogaloo Boys, not much information on them. There was apparently a screenshot of Discord server of at least one faction of Boogaloo Boys who showed them be really horrible racists. And some people thought this Magnus Pinvidia was using Dore, that Dore was, however well-intentioned, was platforming a fascist. I disagree with this. I kind of disagree. Dore might have been a bit clumsy about the way he handled it, but I empathize with what he was trying to do. He was not trying to create a red-brown alliance. What he was trying to do is create a working-class alliance. Dore modeled himself after Fred Hampton. He would often say this. So, he got a few things wrong. Yeah, he was on Revolutionary Blackout Network, and they talked about Fred Hampton. And, Dore said, Fred Hampton worked with the Young Patriots who were racist from the South. There was one of the Revolutionary Blackout people said, a little correction to push back. The Young Patriots had broken out of racism already. There's some disagreements, but I get what Dore's trying to do. I get what he's trying to do. He's a little clumsy. He already had a target on his back from his earlier fights. So, okay. Finally, the Dore went against COVID narratives. And I don't want to get into this too much, and this is why I probably lose a few subscribers. Dore was fully vaccinated, took the lockdowns and quarantines very, very seriously. You could tell he was almost a nervous wreck during that period of time. He just looked, he had cabin fever, and a lot of people did. He claimed he got long COVID he had adverse reaction from the vaccines. And he looked around, usually you're not supposed to have an adverse reaction. The media ignores it or mocks it. He found a doctor who's understandable, who's understood him and put him through a course of treatment. And he's talked about this. And I'll just say that the way this country has handled COVID is real. It's a very real health emergency. The way this country, a lot of countries have handled it, are just bizarre. There's no treatment for it. What I mean by that, there is no treatment for it. Literally, you wear a mask, social distancing, lockdown, quarantines. In some places, the lockdowns have created far more harm and far more deaths than COVID has. Lockdowns, quarantines, and vaccines, of course. And if you get it, you put you on a ventilator. And if you're over 60, over 50, and in rough shape, it's basically a death sentence. There are things, no early treatment. It's taken the mainstream. I'm talking about mainstream treatments, like not forced you remember, but mainstream treatments just taken off the table. Even at the end, like the ventilator stage, that's all I have. Like there are people, like elderly people who said, you know, they had COVID, they talked to their doctor, and the doctor said, just sit at home, wait till you get sick enough, and we'll put you on a ventilator, which means you're going to die. So, you know, there are other things which could have been done, but they're not discussed. They're taken off the table completely. And Dore was cutting across this. And, you know, in a democratic society, why can't you openly discuss it without being censored or people thinking you're QAnon or flat earth or anti-scientific? I strongly support science, and so does Dore. So I don't want to get too much into this, but, you know, Dore was pushing back some narratives. He got a lot of shit for this, of course. He worked with other leftists, Max Blumenthal and some other people on the left. And a fair number of leftist YouTubers I follow agreed with him. Convo Couch, Frank Analysis, fair number of others echoed some of his concerns, white, you know, from the left, not the right. But anyway, so why can't we openly discuss this? You know, it's from one way of treatment from on high, and that was what we did. There was no like hospitals or clinics or doctors sharing best practices or what works well. That was taken off the table. So the people slammed Dore for this, didn't like him anyway. So whatever. So anyway, that's the whole thing. Okay. Finally, Dore's Bill Maher. Okay, Dore. Now, okay, let me background here. We have the culture wars, and there's so trans LGBT people, especially trans people, got caught in the crosshairs big time. There was about 8 or 9 years ago, beginning the bathroom hysteria, transgender people in women's, male to female trans people in women's bathrooms. There's a big hysteria on the right, whipped up around this Arizona bathroom bill. I've written several articles about this when I was in Socialist Alternative. I might post a few of them. And I made a video about a year ago when I talked about some of this. A lot of hysteria whipped up on the right. Okay. And also now there's hysteria over puberty blockers. And so many people, this happened, I don't know, there's a couple of books written about 5 or 6 years ago. I started noticing this hysteria about puberty blockers, a lot of misinformation, understanding. Basically, puberty blocker, they've been used for the last 20 years. They're used on people when, you know, children who have way too early puberty, like 6 or 7, which sometimes happens. It's reversible. It delays puberty by a couple of years. So they've been used by transgender children who feel, you know, boy, who feel as girl, or vice versa, and to put off it for a couple of years until the doctors can make a decision. It is reversible. What's not reversible? Natural hormones. People get a hormone wash around puberty, and accepting transgenderism is a real thing. People have intense innate identification with something other than their birth gender. The suicide rate for trans children is out the walls, like something like 50% of all like male to female transgender children who identify that way have attempted suicide or have expressed severe suicidal ideation anyway. So this is just putting it off until, you know, doctors can make, and, you know, professionals that these people work with, therapists can make an informed decision which direction you want to go. But there's hysteria whipped up around it. There's this weird, you know, they're experimenting on children. They're you know, and I read a fair number of right-wing blogs or, you know, comments on even the Duran, the Moon of Alabama, such as being to the sacred, like the following the Ukraine conflict. There are some people, a fair number of people might say, who are a conservative, nationalist, anti-imperialist. I don't agree with their narratives, but it is a pretty big narrative. I don't agree with it, but people who oppose U.S. imperialism, but do it not on working class solidarity grounds, but on like conservative, nationalist grounds. And it's fairly big, and they have the latest, this became the latest thing, the culture wars. Okay, on the left, there's a fad up and down the West Coast, as far as I know, to have like drag queen story hours, have drag queens read stories to little kids in the libraries. I see nothing wrong with it. I think it's kind of cute in a way. Nothing wrong with, you know, ancient traditional tribal societies had a lot of gender fluidity, and, you know, nothing, absolutely not going to warp kids. But the popular perception of it is that it weirds out. It seems to be a fad in the West Coast. It weirds out a lot of people. A lot more conservative oriented people are weirded out by it, and it's disturbing. And there was a trans swimmer, I forget her name, I think University of Pennsylvania, Tia something, a male-bodied person, very big person, was competing, and was transgendered, identified as a woman, had surgery, and was competing in people, with a lot of pushback, this unfair competition, person who looks like a male. The issue of trans athletes is kind of complicated. Hormones do reduce muscle tone, and basically, a friend of mine said a way of cutting through that would be to have sports or athletics remove gender from entirely. Of big body, men competing against big body women, or medium size, having according to weight classification, body size, so on instead of genders. It would be a way of cutting across all that. But it's been the whole stuff was like a magnet for people who are more conservative minded, and also the left there's a strong current of cultural conservatism in the left, and there always has been. Like until the 1980s, most of the socialist left in the U.S. was homophobic. Like people who were gay or whatever were kicked out of the Communist Party or the Socialist Workers Party and so on. Ted Grant, who was founder of the IMT, major British-based Trotskyist organization, he was pretty openly homophobic. By the time it reflected feelings on the part of the British left. So the left hasn't always been accepting of LGBT people either, and that's important to keep in mind. There's still a large undercurrent of this, unfortunately. There's a phenomena of woke imperialism, which Hillary Clinton was really pushing for a time. The idea that, the West, it's LGBT rights are part of Western values. Like, for example, we should support Israel because they're supposedly more LGBT friendly. Supposedly a gay community in Jaffa or Tel Aviv or something. The Palestinians are homophobic and vicious, so we need to, it's okay to kill Palestinians at the behest of LGBT rights, which is insane. Which reactionary book? The Politics of Every Day, and I forget the author. She was in the ISO. I forget the name of the author. I did a review of her book about a year ago, and she talks about how need for solidarity with groups who don't always like you. For example, Pauline Park is a great example. I interviewed her a year ago. She's a trans activist, Korean American trans activist in New York. She went to Gaza. She went to Gaza. She had a solidarity group of LGBT people express solidarity with the Palestinians. There's in the LGBT bill in Britain during the Thatcher 80s Thatcher era. They expressed solidarity with striking coal miners. There's solidarity between different communities. That's like Marxist intersectionality. Even when these communities may not really like you or feel comfortable, you still express solidarity with oppressed communities. But this idea of woke imperialism is invited or has already created a huge backlash. Like I mentioned, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow has a rainbow flag. Like it's the worst possible thing they could do for LGBT rights. I know people who support the Ukraine-Russia conflict, who support Ukraine because they're supposedly LGBT friendly, which is nonsense. The Pride Parade in Kiev has been canceled because they're attacked by neo-Nazis. Ukraine is very much basically a Nazi state when you get down to it, or semi-Nazi state. You're not really cool an LGBT pill either, but they are whipping this up in the community, the LGBT community. Glenn Greenwald pointed out years ago, an article when he was with Salon, I believe, how the military-industrial complex has got their claws in the U.S. LGBT community. The Pride Parade in San Francisco, they were originating of Chelsea Manning as their more parade march, and she was in jail at the time, but to express solidarity. But the military-industrial complex has ties with the LGBT community, and they want to cut that off. So, so this is like in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was running against Trump, the Democratic National Convention, there were a whole bunch of generals there, or retired generals. This is when the very obvious security state was coalescing on the Democrats at the time. A whole bunch of these retired generals were saying how much they support diversity and LGBT rights. The U.S., this is one of those blood-soaked institutions on the planet. I thought, this is not going to end well for LGBT rights. It's an anti-imperialist backlash on the left, and they're gonna blame LGBT people. LGBT people are allowing themselves to be used as a wedge issue in U.S. imperialism. That's something we have to push back against. Okay, so there is some anti-trans sentiment on parts of the left. It's a rebellion. It's wokeism, reactionary wokeism, and Dore was kind of reflecting this. So Bill Maher, who I don't really like, Bill Maher's a comedian. One of those people who came, I think, in the early Bush administration, liberal kind of comedian or media figure. He often punches down. He talks about the absurdities of organized religion, and he's absolutely correct. But the religion he mostly focuses on is, guess what? Islam, which happens to be where they have our the standing living on, where we have our oil. You know, if it's in the needs of U.S. imperialism, very much pushing down, punching down. And his movie Religulous, which I said it's kind of funny. I saw it with an evangelical Christian family member who actually liked it, though it was funny. And it was kind of interesting, but he pushes, Bill Maher punches down. So anyway, Dore had this video, or he had two videos actually, where he focused on this, where he echoed. Bill Maher said, claims it's a fad among the upper middle class liberals, and that kids go through stages. And Bill Maher didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. If you want to disagree with it, fine, but he has some basic research or talk to people knowledgeable about LGBT issues. He didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Seriously, he was height of ignorance. This very high suicide rate among transgender youth. I mean, Bill Maher, it's not just a stage kids go through, and he had no idea what he was talking about. And people in the LGBT community pointed this out. Well, Dore echoed this, and you got to laugh. And Dore, come on, Jimmy, don't. Now, I was annoyed. That was really bad. I don't support this. He did the show, Jimmy Dore did that episode with Jackson Hinkle and Kurt Metzger, who I guess is a comedian. I don't know that much about him. He's often on Jimmy Dore's show. He's a leftist comedian, and Dore's trying to give a boost to his career. And Jackson Hinkle is a leftist YouTuber, very young, 22, I think, got phenomenally successful in a short period of time. I generally agree with his stand on most issues. Jackson Hinkle is very conservative, like culturally, socially, very conservative in a lot of ways. Politically, I more or less agree with them. But anyway, they didn't say anything. They didn't know. I mean, they just sat there. They didn't have any background on this. Okay. Anyway, I'm upset at Dore, but I'm not going to cancel Dore. I mean, he's still useful to the left. He's bringing people out of the Democratic Party, which is what we desperately need. And, far more influence than a tiny socialist organization. He's calling for a general strike. Whereas the political direction he wants to lead people in, when he says, I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, now, the reason why I want to make this, I don't know either, why I want to make this video, he may be running for president. And some thoughts on that. Okay, first of all, independent candidate for president. What's the purpose? Howie Hawkins ran last time in Jill Stein. I worked for Jill Stein's campaign. I didn't really like her a lot. I like Juma Baraka, her running mate, a lot more. And I'm not a fan of the Green Party, but I like Juma Baraka. I politically align with him. I'm not a fan of the Green Party. Okay, Howie Hawkins ran last time. He was a horrible candidate, absolutely horrible candidate. I met him twice. I met him. He's in Portland, Maine. There was a tiny group of people, Green Party activists, and they were talking. First thing Howie got there said, are you my campaign staff? I felt a little taken back by that. No, I didn't come there to be part of his campaign staff. I came there to listen to him. He was the primaries in the Green Party, and hear different candidates, see what they say. It was so presumptuous on the part of Howie Hawkins. Like, you my campaign staff? Okay, Howie Hawkins has been a long-time activist. He's been around for years. He's from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, somewhere in Georgia. He has a southern accent, but he's based in Syracuse, New York. He's been around. He was in the Socialist Party for a while. They didn't treat him very well, just so he moved to the Green Party. And he's okay. I met him at Left Forum in New York, I think 2018 or so. I think, and interesting guy. I don't know. I didn't follow him super closely. Friends of mine who know him better than I did say, when he's with the Green audience, he's more green, and when he's a Socialist audience, he's more socialist. He changes pitch. The event I went to in Portland, Maine, it was a tiny green audience. I was like the only socialist there, or more of a socialist background than anybody else there. And I asked him questions. It was a Green Party. He and Bruce Dixon did a critique of why the Green Party is not a working class party, how it could be made into one. And now I asked him questions. It's a working class party now. We solved all our problems. It's a working class party now. And I asked him, people there were really shocked. I mean, in a nice way, but they were impressed by it. Wow, people say, wow, you really know your stuff. I mean, the people that were nice people, the Green Party activists, they had no theory. They don't know anything about political theory. I'm not saying I'm a genius either, but they had no background in political theory. Same way I brought up some things. Howie Hawkins was a little, he didn't expect that. Anyway, his take on the issues are bad. Like, he supported Julian Assange up until 2016 and implied that, he helped get Trump with support the Russiagate bullshit. He supported Russiagate. He believed Russiagate, which is really nonsense. And he's trying to get liberals to support him who wouldn't have voted for him anyway. As far as U.S. imperialism goes, he denounced U.S. imperialism, but said it would be necessary to keep U.S. troops in some countries for stability. Horrible take. He was not, this is before the major BLM protests 2 summers ago, but he was not really anti-police, police abolitionist. Said, no, I'm in Syracuse, New York, and a lot of Black communities, they like the police, they need the police for protection. Yeah, a complicated issue, but he really badly handled that thing. And okay, now you got to think of the main. So I didn't really like him. His personality is really not uncharismatic. Now you got to think of what's the reason for running a third-party candidate. What's the reason for it? Build a movement. Okay, not to win, it's to build a movement. And charisma is an important part of it. Howie Hawkins had no charisma, negative charisma. He's not a nice guy. He doesn't come off as he comes so bristly. He comes off as a nerdy math professor, your least favorite math professor in high school or college or something. He has this he kind of gave me the creeps. Not so odd, can't quite pick it up. Personal chemistry. He didn't seem to, he had this weird negative charisma. I picked up about besides any political drama. There were allegations that the Green Party primaries were rigged. They're probably true. I haven't followed it closely. The people who ran against Howie Hawkins in the Green Party primaries were actually politically probably worse, granted. Howie Hawkins had some, some Facebook, some fans and supporters who were almost like cult-like. It was almost like Democratic Biden supporters. If you don't support Biden, you're giving into the right wing. We got the same argument around Howie Hawkins. If you criticize Howie Hawkins, you're a secret Democratic Party. You really support. Didn't really like any criticism of Howie Hawkins supporters. Didn't like any criticism from the left either. The Democrats don't, but Howie Hawkins supporters didn't either. I definitely noticed that. So it was a mess. Now, Jesse Ventura. There's talk of Jesse Ventura running. I think he should have. Now, yeah, people say, he's not as theoretically developed. Of course he is, of course. But what's the purpose? He was people say he's kind of left-wing Donald Trump. He had charisma, and the U.S., for like it or not, is a celebrity culture. Like, people know, I work with kids. Kids I work with, they barely know Hitler or Stalin or Mao or any figure. They barely know this. But they'll know every detail of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. They follow. We have a celebrity-drenched culture. People worship celebrities and know a lot about them. Well, anything else people barely know. So I would mention some family members, Howie Hawkins, and nobody heard of him. And nobody ever will hear of him outside a tiny group of leftist activists. Nobody's heard of him. Jesse Ventura, everybody's heard of him. Jesse Ventura, people's eyes light up. We have a celebrity-oriented culture. And the idea of running a candidate, political theoretical background, Jesse Ventura's not that great, but he is very good at being a populist rabble-rouser. He was governor of Massachusetts, Democrats hated him. He was a populist rabble-rouser. And there was an powerful 2016, also 2020, powerful anti-insurgent mood. People didn't really like Trump. Half the country hated his guts. There was a cult group of following around Trump, of course, but half the country hated his guts and was terrified of him. No one really liked Biden. People voted for him because, Bernie Sanders made a lot of mileage and populist insurgent campaign, but that was nipped in the bud. So people were really wanting something. And Jesse Ventura, if he had run, he could have cut. Of course, it's not he's going to run for president or do these great things. That's not why you run. For a leftist. You run to get a platform, to call out the corruption in the system, to educate people along socialist grounds. And Jesse Ventura campaign could have gone far to doing this. And outside chance, maybe he could have run. That would have created a whole series of other issues. It would have destabilized the system from the left, which is what I'm not counting on the Ventura presidency to actually do anything. It's not what I'm saying, but it could have destabilized the system from the left. That didn't happen. He had a show on RT, and he claimed he didn't want to give up health insurance. Maybe it's true. Maybe somebody threatened him. Who knows? So anyway, there's talk of Jimmy Dore running for president. And he says he's thinking about it, deciding on. In fact, Jackson Hinkle wanted him to. Kurt Metzger was kind of up in the air. Apparently, Max Blumenthal kind of is friends with Dore. Said, yeah, he thinks he should. And, a couple other people kind of supported it. Think about it. Dore will be, it's already attacked. He'll be viciously, relentlessly attacked. I wouldn't be surprised if they have death threats or they threaten his wife, or he's worked for years to get some success and he has a nice house in Pasadena. They might threaten to destroy him to take that all away. And they could if he upsets the apple cart. He has, I mean, the ruling class doesn't give a shit about Howie Hawkins. Really, they don't. Or Jill Stein was a punching bag, but the ruling class doesn't feel upset. They would be a little worried about Jesse Ventura. Not that Jesse Ventura is theoretically advanced. Absolutely he's not. George Galloway had an interesting comment. He talked about this, and yeah, Howie Hawkins is more, theoretically developed, more of a socialist than Jesse Ventura was. But he said that little Howie Hawkins will come out with his little red flag, and no one will follow. And he's absolutely right. Howie Hawkins got predictably less than 1% of the vote. Absolutely right. Jesse Ventura could have broken through that. Not that he's theoretically going anywhere, but he could have broken through and helped build a movement. And show how fucking corrupt both parties broken through the duopoly, but that didn't happen. And Dore, they may threaten, they could destroy Dore. It's a personal decision. I don't know. He could. So if he runs for president, I strongly support him, even though he has some takes which I don't like, which are cringy. It's not a make or break thing for me. So anyway, Dore is, to his credit, he has opposing viewpoints. He had Danny Haifeng on saying China's socialist and people who oppose that. So he would be open to opposing viewpoint. I'm going to actually, there are a number of transgender activists I could propose who would give an opposing view from the left, who would give an opposing view to his cringy take, who, I think Dore does owe it to the community to say something like that, to have an opposing viewpoint. I could humbly offer myself. If Jimmy Dore wants to have me on, I'll offer myself. But there are many other people with more experience than I do who could also have their take on it. And that's about it. Hope you enjoy my content. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. You know the drill. And have a good day. I'm hoping to have some interviews coming up in the near future. And thank you very much. Bye.